This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Hi, it's Madison McGhee from LA Crimes. I'm jumping in at the top of this episode to let you know that there has been a huge update to the Haskell case since our original recording. I don't want to spoil the big reveal, so make sure to listen through to the end and you'll hear the breaking updates. Hello and welcome to LA Crimes. I'm your host, Madison McGhee. Today, I'm joined by Los Angeles Times crime and investigative reporter Richard Winton. Richard, thank you for being here.
Nice to be here.
Very excited. Later on the show, we're going to be talking about Sam Haskell, a Hollywood agent's son who's accused of committing a triple murder in 2023. But first, I want to talk about you, Richard.
I'm more than willing.
So let's start the show with a segment that I like to call the gateway case. So, Richard, tell me if you remember your first crime case that you ever covered.
I used to cover politics, actually, the irony is, and crime is a lot cleaner. Basically, the case which I remember early on very distinctly was I got this case, and it was actually before the police did. And it was involved a young woman who was like a real-life Cinderella. And she was abused by her stepfather and her mother, sexually abused, tortured, you name it. And she got out of the home and got to her stepsister's house. And basically, the stepsister came to me and told me all about this. And so we investigated this horrible crimes. And we were able to get some child social worker documents because the sister was also in the house, so she was accessible. Eventually, this case led to the parents of this poor girl being prosecuted. The father's still in prison doing about 60 years, and the mother did about 20 years.
Wow. I mean, that's one way to dive into crime from not only a reporting perspective, but feeling like you're really contributing and doing good.
Yeah, it's an unusual situation. Most times in crime, you're following other people's work. But in that case, I actually was the person who was the first person there. There have been people, social workers and other people who've looked at this stuff, but no one had really put together. This all happened in the suburb of El Monte. No one had really put together what horrific acts. And eventually they did try these people, and they covered the trial.
Wow, that's incredible. What was the transition point from politics to crime for you?
Basically, I used to cover a lot of suburban politics, and I covered state politics. And then eventually I moved over into crime. I covered priest abuse in the early 2000s, a lot of cases, talked to a lot of victims. If you've seen the movie Spotlight, you understand that was some of the work I did. And then I transitioned as well. And then I started covering a lot of the LAPD. So I got really enmeshed in all the sort of crime.
Wow.
Daily.
Do you miss politics?
No, not at all. There's a lot of politics still in how crime is handled.
And you've been at the LA Times for a really long time. How long have you lived in LA? I
have lived in LA 30 plus years, worked at the LA Times 30 plus years. I started in the San Gabriel Valley Bureau, which used to exist in the sort of hinterlands. That's where I covered a lot of local politics and stuff. And that's where I started covering a little bit of crime, and eventually moved into the Metro section, started covering a lot of crime, was one of the main people who dealt with priest abuse in the early 2000s. Then I took over the LAPD when Bill Bratton arrived.
It's so interesting to me because you got to see, journalism has evolved and print media has evolved. So you've been around for sort of the transition of like the digitization of what you do. What was that like? Meeting deadlines so something could get printed versus now everything's digital. Like, how has that experience changed over the course of your career?
Well, I literally, as a young reporter, I was involved in covering O.J. Simpson and Rodney King in the second trial. And, it was a glacial pace back then. There was going to be one deadline essentially towards the afternoon or late evening. Today, everything's in nanoseconds. Things we're saying right now can be in print in minutes, online. And we're writing numerous editions. The ironic thing is, years and years before I came into the business, there used to be like 7 editions of like papers like the LA Times a day, and they would print them constantly. And essentially, we've gone back to that same period to here, where the story we have updates. We run a story at 10:30, updates at 11, maybe 2, 3, so on. So we're constantly changing, and whatever happens is dynamic. People often say now, media relations people are like, well, what's the deadline? And I'm like, now. We're publishing in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then you can just update it later when there's new updates.
Yeah. I mean, so often, and readership has changed in terms of a lot of people are very much really like to read in the morning. So we publish a lot of online breaking news in the morning, and we also sometimes wait. We have good stuff. We put it out in the morning.
Interesting. Yeah. So if you are updating a story, do you ever feel like you're sort of trying to beat people to the punch and like get it out as quickly as possible? Or how do you navigate sort of the fact-checking element, which you hold to a really high standard, and also this has to come out?
Some things are fairly plain and clear. So most of the times, it's only more investigative stories where you have to be really more fact-checked. And then we're not really hurrying those stories out. We're planning them out over time. But yes, in some situations, it is very competitive because there are, in Los Angeles, it's a competitive market. There are a lot of news outlets. There's tons. There's just numerous outlets. We're not just talking traditional outlets. We're talking all kinds of different forms of social media outlets, etc. So yeah, it's a very comparative news environment, but obviously you've got to be right, you know. But we tend to break a lot of news, especially when it comes to crime in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're solving crime. It's very, very impressive. So let's dive into the work you did investigating priests in California and what was going on there. And that seemed to be a turning point in your career as a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, basically in the early 2000s, this just starts to unfold a scandal. It's a scandal which was hidden, has been sitting sort of hidden for years, but basically priests have been abusing young boys and sometimes girls in their charge in parishes, and they've been shifted around. The hierarchy of the priest, you know, the archdiocese have known these things, and they've been moving people around and hiding the bad guys and just sending them to clinics, then move them to a new parish where they abuse new people. So we get a bit of a break. Someone leaks a bunch of emails internally because 8 of these guys have been got rid of quietly. And this thing leaks, and originally it was leaked to a radio station. One of the producers actually gave us the emails, and then we were able to develop from that this whole, what's going on here? And then we realized that Cardinal Roger Mahoney, who was the cardinal for Los Angeles, was the main character in the cover-up. Some of these priests, one of them in particular, an infamous one called Michael Baker, who was a serial predator who they paid secretly millions to his victims. He had met with Cardinal Mahoney and basically confessed all his acts and things. And Mahoney had shifted him somewhere else and kept it quiet. And this is basically how it went on. And this is when I sort of realized, you know, these are real crimes which we were exposing. And in that case, we probably revealed maybe upwards of over 100 priests who were involved in this. But a lot of the time, the victims would call us directly, even before the authorities. I would get calls regularly after we started publishing the stories from victims who would tell me, Father X did this to me. And one of those calls was, for instance, from a police officer from Oxnard, you know, when they were kids, you know. And a lot of people rose up and done other things, but they were victims of this horrible system which had gone on for years. And so that's how I got kind of into the crime investigations business.
I mean, there's a piece of this which is the darkness of crime, which is tough to dive into, report on. Hearing these stories really takes a toll. But there's got to be this like exhilarating part of this where like you are like a superhero to these people by exposing this and helping them in a way.
I mean, yes, but you also at the same time, you're sometimes their therapist to some extent. It's really, a lot of people suffer tragic consequences. because it scars them for life, all these events.
Yeah. We call that trauma dumping, us young kids. They trauma dump on you.
Many times that's happened, and it's just part of the process. Unfortunately, I see a small percentage of that. You have to realize there are detectives who spend decades working on these kind of crimes. And no, people don't realize this is what they do daily, day in, day out.
Yeah. I mean, what is it like to hear these stories, especially if people are telling it for the first time, they haven't gone yet to an investigator or a police officer or detective? How many hours do you think you've spent with sources and people that you've helped in this way, just hearing their stories?
It's thousands of hours. I mean, I still remember a few of the conversations distinctly. You just don't forget them. For instance, I remember a woman, a middle-aged African-American woman telling me the story about a guy called Father Neferucca, and her vividly recalling all the details of her youth. And she hadn't really told anyone at that point. And, he'd just been apprehended. Ironically, his case was overturned by the Supreme Court. We actually caught him trying to go to Russia. He was literally on a cruise ship to Russia when they caught him, because he knew what was coming. So he tried to get out by taking a cruise to Vladivostok. But, some of these stories are horrific. And it was there were thousands of victims in California alone.
How do you deal with sort of taking on the trauma of other people? Do you go to therapy? Like, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, you should. But to some extent, at least if you see results at the end of the day, or you understand what happened, we can expose, like, in these cases, the police essentially would catch the priests, but in a lot of the cases, they couldn't criminally charge them. But we exposed who they were. But more importantly, we exposed how this occurred, because these were individual molesters. But in the end, it was a whole system which allowed them to hide for decades. A system of abusers and individuals who are authorizing it, basically at the highest level. We're talking, it'll be like the executives of the corporation, the cardinal, the bishops. They knew this was going on, but they kept it a secret.
Yeah. So I assume you don't go to church on Sundays?
Not currently. Interestingly, Cardinal Mahoney recently called me, but we'll discuss that some other time.
Oh, interesting. Well, we will on another episode, perhaps. Richard and I will be right back right after we take a quick break. You know when a shirt just becomes your go-to? That's what happened when I picked up a few new pieces from Quince. They're the first things I reach for in my closet. Lightweight, comfortable, and always on point. Quince has all the things you actually want to wear, like organic cotton silk polos, European linen beach shorts, and comfortable pants that work for everything from backyard hangs to nice dinners. The best part? Everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury pieces without the crazy markups. Elevate your closet with Quince. Go to quince.com/LAcrimes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/LAcrimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LAcrimes. Welcome back to LA Crimes. I'm joined by Richard Winton, a Los Angeles Times crime and investigative reporter. And let's dive into today's case, which is the Sam Haskell thing of it all. I don't even know where to start. So will you just give me an overview of the story?
Well, let me set the scene. The first scene here is at a dumpster in Encino. And a homeless individual is looking around, probably for some recyclables. And as he's going through the trash, he finds what seems to be inside a black sack, body parts. He knows to tell the cops, so he tells the cops. The cops come, yep, those are body parts. Well, it turns out a couple of days before, the LAPD officers up in the valley had a report from some day laborers who were told, "Oh, can you come to my house and help me move this bag of rocks?" And they went there and they moved this bag, and they were like, this isn't rocks. This is some sort of meat. Something's in there. And they started to move it, and they were like, no, we shouldn't be doing this. And they were being offered like $500 to do this. And so they were like, no, we're not doing this. And they put it back. And they also go to the local police station and report it and go, hey, we think something's going on. I think this could be like body parts or something. And the LAPD doesn't obviously rush over there because they got a lot of business going on, but they go over there and there's nothing there. So, but now we've got this sack of body parts in this dumpster, and we've got this prior report of these guys being asked to remove from a Tarzana house what may have been body parts. So now they're looking, all right, who lives at this house? And that's when they came across Sam Haskell.
And whose body parts are in these bags? They don't know.
They don't know at this point. But they know Sam lives there with his wife, Mei Lee, and her parents. And they're not there. Now, the children at school, they check and they find the children at their nice private school. But there's nowhere to see. Mei and her parents aren't anywhere to be found.
So the first initial report by these people who were hired to transport the rocks to the dumpster, when they made their initial report, what was happening there? They called, or what? How did they file the report?
They went to the station. They went to the front desk and basically said, look, we were asked to move these so-called rocks. We started moving them. It was wet. It's kind of like blood, sort of like meat. We think there's something in the bag which shouldn't be in the bag. Could be body parts. And this conversation, by the way, is Spanish to English broken, and there's clearly some miscommunication to some degree with the LAPD at this station.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me just because of sort of the validity of the witness, right? These people can't really speak English. Now you have a homeless person saying, I found these body parts in the trash. So you have sort of two people considered maybe to be like written off by society, the police, etc. And these are the people who are now going up against this person who has money and wealth. And it's right now, as it stands, their word against his.
There's one really important thing now. We have the bag with the body parts. It's a headless torso.
Did they run DNA on the body that they found to confirm?
The body doesn't have a head, but eventually, yes, they run DNA. They run DNA, and they basically eventually confirm this is his wife. And eventually, the coroner determined, based on what they could, she'd been killed, but they couldn't say exactly how. They know she could have been shot, suffocated, tortured, or even beheaded while alive, but possibly a very sharp blade. But they couldn't tell exactly how it was done because they still don't have her head. But it wasn't good enough to charge him with murder. Now it gets stranger. I mean, they still have, the parents were to know where to be found. So what they did then is they looked at his phone and his car track, and they did all this technology stuff they do these days. And they can look at license plate readers. And they worked out that Mr. Sam Haskell is a wannabe sort of producer, worked sort of in Hollywood, had worked at some studios, but his father's very prominent in the industry and had been for many years as a sort of super agent and sort of big boss. He'd basically driven around the county a lot. He created a pattern where it'd make it hard for them to work out where he'd been. They did find some of his cars in the valley, but to this day, they haven't found those bodies.
It seems so strange for someone who potentially this is their first crime at this level, is doing all of these things to throw off the scent, almost like it's so meticulously planned for someone who's not a career murderer.
It's a good question. I mean, the nearest heat, as far as we could tell, he'd been to any sort of thing like that was being in one of his inner movies or in and around movies which had been like slasher flicks. But he'd never been accused of anything really this serious or anything like this. But he seemed to have an awareness of how to make it hard for them to determine what he'd done. He has made it hard, I can tell you now, because it's pretty rare to have a no body still.
Yeah, and how has this impacted his dad's reputation?
His dad is sort of retired. He'd been involved in, running a lot of industry stuff for many years, very prominent in sort of the Miss America and a bunch of, agency work, representing people, represented some very important people. But obviously, it was a big shock. His father is way better known than him. Until now, Sam Haskell was generally known as the father. This is Sam Haskell IV. This is a dramatically different character from his father. That, in his first court appearance, he turns up and his shirt is half off, and you can see these elaborate arm tattoos. It seems like they have him in what they call a suicide prevention vest, kind of, and clearly there's some mental health issues going on.
I think this is so interesting because for someone who did a lot of strategic decisions like driving around and trying to sort of get the scent off of them, they did involve other people and give away a bit of this control by calling people who barely speak English to then get their handprints on these bags and get them out of there. Is that a first in your...
No, unfortunately, some people do the crime, but then are too lazy to do the cover-up. I mean, but it has been effective historically to put bodies into landfills. So he may have been aware of that and felt the quickest way to the landfill may be these individuals. It does seem like naive to try and tell them it's rocks when it's clearly not rocks, and they're going to work out fairly quickly it's not. He paid them fairly significantly, but for relatively moments of work. So they had to have, that would also trigger kind of suspicions that maybe there's something more going on here. This is like, this 120-pound bag of rocks they're meant to be moving, but it's not rocks, and they're going to pretty much gel to that quickly. But of course, there's the logic in his mind. Well, he has remembered what he's done already. He's cut up his wife. He's probably done something to his in-laws. He still took his kids to school.
Well, Richard, there's so much more to talk about, and we will be right back to talk about Sam Haskell, the son of a Hollywood agent who is accused of a triple murder, when we come back. So, Richard, Sam Haskell is the number one suspect. Did they look at anyone else when they first found out that there was a body in a dumpster?
I think it was pretty much because they got the day laborer's story, and they know Sam is the one who told the day laborers about the bag. Once they got in that house, there was lots of forensic evidence. Sam is the person who lives there. The other three adults are missing who live there. It's a very nice Tarzana home. Apparently his wife, earned quite a bit of money, so they lived fairly well. I mean, forensics usually is where they go, and it's all the evidence pointed towards him at that point.
So what happens next? Do the police come and arrest him right away? Do they wait? Like, how quickly is this all happening?
He's taken into custody fairly rapidly. I mean, the evidence is really just pointing right at him. There's not really, anyone else. There's another crucial piece of information. One which people may have seen. There's a little video. It turns out Sam Haskell has not only made the mistake of handing the rocks to the day laborers, he's also chosen to dump his wife's torso from his Tesla into a dumpster which just happens to have it sit below the perfect security camera of snap capturing the entire moment. So there's a video of the man who seems to be Sam Haskell pulling very heavy black sack out of the back of his Tesla and coming across and putting it into the dumpster. That is what you call good evidence.
Yeah, that's incriminating evidence. Hard to have reasonable doubt when it's caught on camera.
Well, that or he's disposing of a very large amount of rocks.
Not near his house.
Not near his house, several miles away. He's just chosen to drive his nice Tesla with this very big bag of something across town, basically, and then just found a random dumpster outside an office building, which is conveniently right in front. And he's forgotten to look around like many good criminals would have. If they've watched male TV shows, maybe they noticed. The security camera caught it all.
Yeah, if you're going to commit a crime, you should probably watch an episode of Dateline or two before you do it.
Yeah, you should always check for the security cameras,
So as far as motive, I mean, crime of passion seems so obvious if it's wife's parents, but has anything been illuminated as you've been covering this about why potentially this happened? We talked to the wife's family. There were definitely financial stresses in the family. She seems to earn a lot of the money. Their mortgage is pretty big. She's a hard worker. She's in the business world. She does a lot of the work. He's kind of, that rich son of the famous guy. He gets work in Hollywood, but it's kind of on and off. She's clearly carrying the burden. He's got some wacky side interests. He's got some sort of social media he's making. He likes to collect like weapons and swords and weird stuff, but he's clearly not all together. The motive, is it really clear? Well, is he just flat out unhinged? Or does he just doesn't like the dynamic? Maybe doesn't like living with his in-laws. It's not one of those like clear he did it for the money or something at this stage. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be. Yeah. And what are the children doing in the meantime?
We understand that they're now with in-laws. That's what we've been told. There's a whole international element as well to this case because his wife and the in-laws were from China. Most of the relatives who came to some of the court proceedings early on were from China, and they knew there was some sort of weird interactions within the family between him and his in-laws and his wife, but they had no fathom of what level this was at until this horrific act happened.
And are they treating the in-laws as a murder even without bodies, or are they saying they're missing?
No, they have charged murder. We are talking the kind of murder which puts you away in prison without parole. If he is convicted in this case, no body murders happen in Los Angeles County. Probably a dozen a year. People disappear. As long as we can show some physical evidence of the murder and there's a pattern of behavior, that will not stop the prosecutor putting it on this case. And often, eventually, the bodies are found. I have other cases, like there was a Fox executive murdered many years ago, and eventually the body was found up in Acton, before trial. So it's often that the body will eventually yield the evidence.
And do you think that's like the prosecutor's biggest priority right now is trying to locate these bodies, or are they just going to keep moving forward?
No, it's more if they think they've got the forensic evidence. They obviously have the wife's torso. They have evidence of murder on the wife. In the end, they can always convict him just of the wife. But they will not do that. They will try. Beth Silverman, in this case, will try him for every one of these murders and probably will meticulously have evidence. There's probably going to be eventually revealed some sort of electronic communications. Nowadays, we typically see a lot of text, messages, all kinds of stuff showing sort of like his behavior in the weeks and days beforehand.
Yeah, it's so fascinating just because there are so many questions. And he's not saying anything at all. He's not giving up where the bodies could be, why this could have happened. Even in some cases where some people will then sort of say, there was something going on that I was the victim is sort of a spin that happens sometimes. He's not saying anything.
He hasn't shown his cards yet. In the murder business, sadly, trials take time. And both sides keep their cards close, especially when there's not been any real moments in court with preliminary hearings or anything. They just wait and wait and wait. And they're trying to see what they can do here. I mean, we're not clear whether is he going to try at some point claim insanity? What is going to be his ultimate defense here? We're waiting to see really where his cards are.
What's his defense looking like? Does he have a public defender, or has he hired a...
No, he's hired top-rated private attorneys. I mean, he's going to put on... They're certainly going to try and knock this thing down. I mean, he comes from a family of sort of means. They have the means to really pay someone who's top-rated. Not to say the public defender wouldn't defend in high-level murder cases. They're actually very effective. But yeah, this is a case where his attorneys, if they think they can't beat the rap, so to speak, they may at least try and reduce his exposure. In this kind of case, right now, he does not face the death penalty. It was a life without parole maximum here. But his attorney's probably goal here would be, can we get him a conviction? Maybe if they think they can't beat the whole thing, then can we get him out in his lifetime? They want a window. They will try anything. That's when they may plea if they can get a deal which sets him free one day.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this could turn into a real circus. Is he the type of person you think that you've seen sort of recently in your career where cases pick up a lot of traction online, which we've discussed before? Do you think this has the potential for that?
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of mystery in this case. I mean, even the first few appearances, the mysterious tattoos, his demeanor in the courtroom, this case begs so many questions. The motive, why, where are the bodies?
Do you think that's enough reasonable doubt?
His problem is, they literally have a video of him dumping the carved up torso of his wife. That is very hard to overcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I've got Richard here to give an update on the more recent happenings with Sam Haskell. So, Richard, since the last time we talked, there's been a big twist in the case. What happened in the last few days?
Okay, so what happened is we were just about to have a preliminary hearing where we finally get to hear the evidence against Sam Haskell. And we get to the weekend beforehand. They go to his cell and they find him dead at his own hand. He's killed himself pre-trial. He's in Twin Towers. He's meant to be on suicide watch, by the way. They're meant to be keeping an eye on him because if some of you may remember, if you've seen the images of him in court, you could see he had this kind of suicide restrictive vest, which is meant to basically prevent him from harming himself. But lo and behold, a couple of days before trial, he's found dead in his cell, and they say it was his own hand. It was a suicide. In the wake of that, the district attorney, Nathan Hochman, revealed what evidence they were planning to present at trial and kind of gave us a little hint of what may have been his motive. They can't be absolutely sure, but they have a better idea. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what they actually found. So Mr. Hochman says when they eventually got in the house, they found multiple plastic bags containing all kinds of things she clearly used to dismember his in-law and wife, including, machete, chainsaw, all covered in DNA and their blood. And so it was pretty clear. Oh, and there was a .357 Magnum pistol with the blood of his in-laws on. So it looks like he may have even shot them. In addition to that, they found out what could be a motive. He says he can't be absolute this is a motive, but it turns out Sam Haskell had a secret girlfriend. The married Sam Haskell had been arranging to go to Japan with his secret girlfriend in the month after the murder. He bought her a two-way ticket and himself a one-way ticket. Not quite sure what that's about. In addition, he told the girlfriend that Soon his kids will be living with his parents, which seems like then he was actually planning this murder for a while. But this is the first time we've kind of got an insight into why did he do this.
Wow. I mean, I have so many questions, but I guess in this case, it's like sort of case closed. That's it. They won't present any of this. Nothing happens next. It's just done. Where is the girlfriend?
Not sure where the girlfriend, but there's another sad, sad element to this mystery. He took to his grave where the in-laws are. We don't have their bodies, and we don't know where their bodies are. He is the only one who knew where the bodies were. And he didn't tell the authorities, and he seemingly hasn't told anyone else. So at this stage, sadly, those parents of his wife have never been recovered.
Did he leave a note?
They haven't said whether he left a note, but they have said they do not know where the in-laws are, and he is the only one who knew.
What about the children?
We don't know exactly where his children are. They may be with his parents, but we don't. There hasn't been any public confirmation. We know at the time of the murder, the authorities went and got them from school and took them into care at that point because, this was obviously a shocking crime.
But no word if they had ever visited him or if they were maintaining a relationship before he died.
No, we don't know. It's probably fairly doubtful the child would be able to visit the county jail. I don't know what other legal arrangements they had. At this stage, this case is essentially closed, but it's sadly for, the mystery. I met some of these people, the extended relatives. Some of them came from China to here. They do not have the bodies of their loved ones.
Will they question the girlfriend at all, or do they assume she knows nothing?
I presume that they were planning to present some evidence, would have involved eventually having her testify. It sounds to me, based on what Mr. Hockman said, she did not know of any ill intent. She, obviously knew he was a cheater and probably was planning on leaving his wife, but she had no perception of obviously what he was going to do.
Right. Yeah, cheating and murder
are big ways apart.
Yeah, right. Wow. Well, I mean, quite a way to end this story and pretty shocking, but also not surprising given the restrictions he already had. And it's very curious that this was able to happen with their knowledge within the jail that he was suicidal.
Yeah, just to understand the context here, he was the 26th person to die in the Los Angeles County jail system this year by either their hands, someone else's hands, or medical issues.
So there might be more to this story.
Yeah, I'd expect there'll be more than a few questions about suicide watches and generally high oversight of high-level inmates. Generally, there's a check routine, and there'll be a lot of questions whether that was followed and how he was able to access the means he did this by.
Well, it looks like another case we'll have to do another follow-up episode on. We'll keep an eye on it, but thank you so much for the update. And that's all for LA Crimes.